Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for logging into my session today. I'm excited. And I just got a message, I'm sorry, about screen recording. So my name is Michelle Bateman, and I teach second grade ELA at the West Allegheny School District. And let me get on to my next slide. They asked us to put a little bit of information in this first slide about the school district and what their plan was whenever this all happened. We were at work, we had a meeting, and they said that we were gonna go home and not do anything, and we weren't sure what direction we were gonna head from there. So we all went home with our computers and just waited to hear more. And once PDE came up with a plan, our district jumped right on it. They did a great job of coming up with a very thorough continuity of education plan for all of us to follow. They gave us very explicit directions on what we were supposed to teach. We were focusing on content. We were definitely introducing new material, and we were able to use whatever platform we felt most comfortable with to get that information and to get those lessons across to our students. So we were very fortunate in the fact that they worked very quickly and very thoroughly so that we had direction on where to go. The story that we chose as a second grade to work on is a chapter book that normally we would do for the month of May, but we realized that doing it in the classroom with me working with the kids one-on-one in small groups and things like that, we were definitely going to have to take a step back and slow it down and look at how we were going to take those standards and incorporate them in a slower, more manageable pace. So when I first started, probably the first 2 weeks didn't look this pretty because I was trying to figure out how that was going to work. And we all talked about different things, and we figured out Google Slides and how you could insert a picture and add all these boxes for the kids to type on. But then it took so much time for us to try to get in there and get all of that information out. And it wasn't necessarily meaningful because it was just so much stuff in so many different places. So we wanted to make sure we were focusing on our standards, and obviously there is a fluency standard. And what we did was we came up with sharing a passage with our students. And we're not going to read through this passage, but this is something that they always did in class and they always did as part of homework. So it was an easy transition because they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were supposed to do. And so they have their reading that they were supposed to do with their adult. And initially we started with that form with a bunch of boxes on it, and they would type in all their information. But then again, I had 48 kids that I had to go back and look at the boxes. So I was trying to come up with a better plan. And I actually had a friend that I was helping do a PE form for, a Google form. And he was going in and trying to figure out minutes of exercise for the kids. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant. I'm going to try that. So I created a fluency form. So when the parents read with their kids, then the kids could go in, or the parents, whoever was more able to do it, and entered last name, first name, how many words they read, their number of mistakes, and then they would get a total at the bottom. And it was important to include the last name and the first name because after a week of doing this, because they do it every day, it gave us data on a spreadsheet that I was able to sort by their last names, which I deleted for confidentiality. But you can see that when you sort it by their last names at the end of the week, now I have some data to go with. And this child right here, here's his 4 or 5 days of data. The next child, and they're all sorted. So I can see the progression, and we have something to work with from there. And we can also see quickly if parents are doing it incorrectly. For example, we had a couple that were entering 256. Well, they clearly were just reading through the whole thing. They were not reading 256 words in 1 minute. So it was easy for us to go in and see where the problems were, so then we could send out emails to individual parents rather than bombard everybody with an issue that wasn't theirs. So we really liked how this form worked out for our fluency. Then we got into vocabulary. The chapter book, and really any book that we're reading, even if it's a picture book, we always work on the vocabulary first. And we were trying to come up with a way that I could do some of the same things in the classroom quickly without actually seeing their faces and going over my vocabulary cards and all of those things. So I created this prior knowledge vocabulary form. And this was based on some of the learnings that I got from the AIU through Isabel Beck, and talking about your knowledge of each individual word. So before any lessons even start, they would get this form, and we were reading the Year of Billy Miller, so I put the cute header on there. And these are their chapter 4 words. They've never heard them before from me, so this was their first time looking at these words. No one is pronouncing it for them. No one is doing anything for them except that they're logging onto this form, and then they go through each word. There are 6, and then they choose what we would normally do in class. Never heard this word. I heard it, but I'm not sure what it means, or yep, I know this word, I got it. So when they do this, I was also able to create another one of those spreadsheets that would give me a graph, and it would show me the majority of the class knows this word, so that's a word that maybe I'll hit, but I'm not going to focus on all week. Only 2 kids out of my 48 knew this word, so clearly that's one that I really need to focus on, because we wanted to make sure that we were providing them with the information on the word so they could use it both in and out of context, as well as have repeated exposures to these words and focus on the ones that they definitely didn't know. So then after that, they would get this slideshow. And now this slideshow, so now there's nowhere for me to choose the sound. But what it did was, as it went through, it would present, and every time they clicked, can you hear it, or can I just hear it? Can you hear it? Can't hear it. So it would go through all of these vocabulary words, and you really don't need to hear my voice repeating them over and over again. But I recorded my voice reading the word, and then they got the definition, which was a kid-friendly definition, and then they got some silly little pictures to kind of give them that extra clue. And another thing that I did learn from some mistakes in my first 2 weeks, I set each sound audio clip to loop. So as long as they're sitting there staring at the picture, it'll keep saying the word and keep saying the definition. So they kept hearing it over and over again so they could get the hang of it. So that was just a couple of examples from that. Then, in order to have some of those experiences in the classroom that we did to really work with these words and use these words, a lot of the things that I would do in the classroom, we have been able to do on either Zoom or Google Meet. I have used both, and they're all of the things that help with the robust vocabulary and really getting them to know it. So we would do example, non-example, and they could give me a quick thumbs up or thumbs down. I could see it on the screen that they got it. They didn't get it. We needed to, work on that one a little bit more. I would say a word association to them, like which word would match the word shriek, and they would have the list up on the screen for them to look at, and they would think about it, and then you could call on different kids. We would make personal connections. Have you ever had a time where you would shriek? Have you ever had a time where you had to make a reservation for something? And normally they would do a turn and talk, and they would have that conversation, but at least they got to think about it. And, I would call in the first 5 kids in Zoom to share their answers, and then the next one would be the next couple kids. We would do sentence stems, making connections. How are brunch and reservation related? Even though they're not the same word, how could you relate those words? And they would have to give examples of it. And would you laugh at someone who shrieked, and then why? And then we would try to make those connections also with vocabulary words that, again, were not related, and then relate them back to a word that we knew. We focus a lot in our classroom normally on explaining to the kids that there are 3 tiers of vocabulary words that they are using whether it's in speaking or in writing on an everyday basis. And I draw the triangle and I explain to them, that they have the tier 1, and that's the biggest part of the triangle. Those are the words that you use frequently. You say them, whether or not you can spell them, but those are words that you're most familiar with. We talk about how the tier 2 words do have a kid-friendly definition that they know. It's just that word is probably a word that they have not seen before. And then we talk about, for the most part in ELA, our tier 3 words would be character analysis, the story elements and things like that. So this is a good way to tie it back to what they are doing to reinforce those words for them so they can use them. We also, I created an exit ticket for them. So that would be one chapter. Now this book is very similar in the way it's set up to the book Wonder. It has 4 different sections, and within each of those sections, there are 5 chapters. So it was nice to be able to stretch this out over 8 weeks because we got to slow it down and we got to get the pacing to a point where we could successfully get the message across to them online. And so we would focus on one chapter at a time. So that would be those activities with the vocabulary and the pretest and all of those things. And then once they read the chapter and they did all of those activities that went along with that, then they would get their exit ticket, which again, I posted the vocab words just so they could have one more peek at them. And we came up with a variety of ways to assess them so we could hit everybody in a different way as best as we could online. So we included a vocab word that has a picture clue. Some of them chose the correct definition. Some of the questions deal with filling in the best word in a sentence. Then we included synonyms because that was something we were working on that week. And then the final two questions were comprehension questions. And then the last one was a short answer text, although it says long answer, the short answer text. Choosing the long answer text makes it easier for the kids to type, because when you choose the short answer text on one of these Google Forms, it keeps going and going and going and going, and it's confusing for them. So this way they could dig deeper into the text and go back into that chapter and get some information. So this was a nice, quick assessment of, do they know the words? Did they read carefully? And can they make their connection? Some of the other activities related to our robust vocabulary online instruction, we did an activity called Caption Me. Now, with every chapter, they have 6 vocabulary words. So I would choose 1 or 2 of these slides that have a silly picture on it. And there's a lot of just silly, ridiculous pictures because it makes them laugh and they enjoy it. And then they would have to type in a caption or a sentence that described what was happening in the picture, but they had to use 1 of their vocabulary words. And again, trying to use all 6 of their vocabulary words would be very challenging even for me to be that creative. So maybe 2 of the words that they know really well, maybe we'll do that and they can focus on this. And these are 2 samples of my kids' work. The one was #shrieks of nature, and the other one was, ooh, I just drank murky water. So shrieks was one of our vocab words and murky was one of our vocab words. So it's just a silly way for them to be able to use the vocab, again, out of context, and show that they know what it means. And they think this is hilarious. Another activity that I have done with them, and what I did on here was I included the directions. So this is how they would get this activity with their directions on it as to what they're supposed to do. And again, I told them to choose 2 to 4 slides. They did not have to do all 6 words. They could choose any 2, 3, or 4, depending on their level, their time, their whatever they had to do that week. So then they would have this vocabulary book about, and then they'd click there to enter their title, and then they were the author. And I did plug in one of my kids' samples. It's pretty bright, but that's what he chose. My vocabulary book all about Pokemon, and Pokemon has absolutely nothing to do with our story, Billy Miller. So that, again, we reviewed that you're taking those words out of context and how are you going to use them. And so he chose the word rehearsal. He found a picture on the internet of a whole bunch of Pokemon who I don't know who they are. And he said all the Pokemons were lined up for a Boy Scout rehearsal. So that was what he chose for his. And another one that he chose was the word boasting. He found this picture of Pikachu. And now again, these are kid samples. Pikachu kept bragging that he was the best at battles. So that was, he didn't use the word boasting, he said bragging. So then we can have a conversation about that, because he does know a synonym for it. So having things like this, yes, he knows how to use the word, he did substitute, but it's a good way for them to use the vocabulary words in a different way, and it's fun for them. And again, 2 slides, 4 slides, it all depends on how many vocabulary words you have. In the classroom, I could do this. I did do this activity where I printed out booklets for them, and they were able to draw pictures. And that was something that they could work on throughout the week with our story. But online, we were trying to still make sure that we were keeping our vocabulary lessons robust and using that vocab in and out of context, and still not overwhelm them, because second graders just don't have the computer skills and the typing skills that they equal to their writing skills, handwriting. So those were some activities that we did for vocab. And then some of the things that I wanted to share for comprehension and skills. It was hard for me to not hear them reading. So we were trying to come up with something where they could share in a different way. And again, the typing component of this has been the most difficult thing for my little ones. So I started using this website, Flipgrid. I'm not sure if any of you have ever used it, but this is an activity that they are doing this week. And it's a 3 emoji book review. So they are reading a book for accelerated reader. And I included an attachment for an Emojipedia. So they have to go on and choose any 3 emojis that tell about the book. And then they're going to make a recording of themselves where they have to explain or they have to introduce the author, they have to say the title of the book, and then they have to be able to explain why they chose the 3 emojis that they chose. There's a setting on here, and the reason I like Flipgrid, this is an example of something they could do to get them really thinking about their books, but there is an option on here for teachers to turn off the immediate posting of the video. So what I have been able to do is, and again, for fluency's sake, in the classroom and always sent home with their homework, we have a fluency rubric. And every week we would focus on one part of that, and we would talk about it over and over again. So whether we were focusing on the expression when you read, or the volume when you read, or your speed, your accuracy, whatever skill we were focusing on for their reading rubric, I have been able to incorporate into Flipgrid by giving them an assignment that is read pages 35 and 36 out loud on Flipgrid, and your goal is to read it with expression. So my direction said, make sure you practice ahead of time, read it out loud to mom or dad or your brother or sister. And then whenever you're ready, you can do your recording. And again, I was able to toggle off that switch for it to post for all of the kids to see. So then it was just something that I had to hear them reading, to see what words they were struggling on, and to see what direction and maybe what small groups I needed to work with via Zoom at another time. So I really like this website. We also do Get the Gist. We do Get the Gist with all of our reading. If we're doing a smaller book that's a quick read, we would focus on the gist, characters, setting, beginning, middle, end. And we always focus on the beginning, middle, end is, talk about the problem, what was the solution. And it has to be 1 sentence long, and that's it. So we wanted to carry this over to keep them thinking about what happened in that chapter. How can you say what happened in those 12 pages in 1 sentence, but the sentence still has to be meaningful enough to get the point across. And this was a good way for the kids to be able to communicate with each other. Now, this is a screenshot that I took, and I know it's hard to read because it's very small, but these are the kids' actual postings from my Google Classroom page, where they got the gist of Mother Chapter 1, they typed in their sentence. And then the other portion of their assignment was that they had to go back and read their classmates' answers, and they had to respond to between 6 and 8 of their classmates with accountable talk. And again, we had to review rules. Accountable talk is, hey, nice job. No. You got an A+. No, that's the teacher's job. So they were able to go in and see that just because what they thought the main idea was doesn't necessarily mean somebody else had it exactly the same. And they were able to have conversations about that. And again, second grade type conversation. So 5 or 6 words. They weren't writing anything that was really long, but it was able to give them a picture of how other people think, or a different perspective that wasn't necessarily wrong just because it wasn't their exact answers. And again, these would be things that in the classroom, I would have them put it on Post-its. We would put the Post-its on the wall. Everybody could go back and look at them. And then at the end of our lesson, at the end of our week, we could go and talk about what would be one sentence that we could agree on from everybody's gist that they wrote. But putting this online gives them the opportunity to read everybody's responses and then respond to their information. Then we did some activities with, what's coming up, and this is a kid sample. This was character feelings, because again, we were trying to keep all of our standards being taught. And even if we were introducing new things, we wanted to make sure that we could talk them through it and get it through it. There were lessons that went up to this point, but I wanted to share this slide with you because I thought the slide was pretty good in how it talks the kids through exactly what they're supposed to do. So the important event that this child chose, now again, this is a child's work, so it's the year of Billy Miller, not the year of Billy Myler, but he typed it. It says the important event was Billy wanted to stay up all night with Nate, but he got sick, so he had to make Sal is his sister, stay up. Then the feelings and thoughts, he was mad that Nate was sick. He was going to do it anyway. He made Sal do it, and he was mad, but when he did it with Sal, he was a little happy, but he still failed. So at least they are able to get these things down in writing and still bring in all of those things with character change and different activities with analysis, character traits, beginning, middle, end. We wanted to make sure that they could still do those remotely. We also did an activity with, this one's coming up this week, so this one is not done yet. But this takes every section of the book, and again, every section has 5 chapters. So I don't know if you guys can see on the side, I was able to put in a little comment section to give them some better direction onto what they were supposed to do. So they can go in and they can give the evidence of the lesson from each chapter. And then we talk about the entire theme of the book and what was the lesson that you were supposed to learn by tying in those 4 things. And when they do this activity, then we will follow up with a Zoom, and I can share some of their screens, and we can talk about how even though you all have different information in those 4 things, your important lesson is generally the same lesson. So again, this was something that they're doing independently, but then we can tie it into a Zoom meeting for discussion, and they can see other kids' work. I think that seeing other kids' work, like missing that component, is one of the most difficult things to try to do online, because when I can hang things in my class or have them put Post-its up or work together, they're able to see what everybody's doing. And trying to find a way to do that online has been challenging. Our district also, whenever PDE released what they wanted school to look like online, our district decided to add in the optional enrichment category of that. So some of the enrichment activities that I was able to pull, I truly was just like winging it, literally, with things that happened in the book. So in this book, the father is an artist. So again, trying to think of equality and what kids have at home. One of their assignments was to go outside, choose things from nature, create a sculpture, take a picture and post it, or take a picture and have your parents email or text it to me. In the beginning of the story, the little boy's family goes and visits the Jolly Green Giant landmark. So we tied that into some little mini research projects on the famous landmark of your choice. And we were able to get to those things through PebbleGo. The last thing that we're going to work on this week is the kids are going to write a poem, because Billy Miller wrote a poem about his mom and had to present it as part of his class. So we were able to kind of think and brainstorm of how we wanted these events to still be able to be tied in and done online. And it was actually kind of nice, because even with like the researching a famous landmark, you know, that took us outside of that genre and got us to focus on some other things. There we go. Some of the things I have learned, again, when this all started, the word Zoom, I've never heard before. Asynchronous, I had to Google. Synchronous, you know, figured that one out because I looked up asynchronous. I had not a clue. I knew that people did these video things, and I knew that I had FaceTime on my phone, but all of this stuff was foreign to me. So I learned from lots of mistakes that when you are creating your assignments, directions need to be clear and detailed. I'm fortunate in the fact that my son is in the school district in which I teach. So he has been a fake student in my class for the last 9 weeks, and I'm able to log on to his computer and test my things. So I literally sometimes sit there and click on his computer and write notes, and click on his computer and write notes, just so I make sure that I am very, very clear, because I want these lessons to be kid focused and not parent focused. I want the kids to be able to get on, follow my directions, and do their job without saying, mom, can you help me? Because they need to be able to figure it out, because quite possibly it's looking like this isn't ending anytime soon. So I want to make sure that they can run this. Another thing that I was trying to keep to a minimum was passwords and websites. When I first started this, I came home and I was Googling this and Googling that, and there were all these amazing resources, but everything required another password, another link, another class code. And I thought, I have thrown so much at these parents and these kids, like I have to back off a little bit. So I tried to focus on a couple things that I really, really liked and the kids got familiar with, because teaching them how to use the programs didn't want to be my focus. Teaching them the skills wanted to be my focus. A variety of tools to allow showcase of learning. Let them type things in, let them take videos, let them send me pictures. Less is more and pacing is everything is another lesson that I learned. I was very ambitious the first week, and then I realized they weren't with me. It wasn't going to work out. And we really needed to focus on their foundational skills. They had to figure out how to use the computer and how to maneuver Google Classrooms before we could even start on anything. We did a lot of fun, silly activities like, here's a slide, insert a picture of your last holiday with your family that you loved and write me a sentence. It had nothing to do with ELA, but at least it got them practicing the skills that they needed. I also have learned that TPT has many fun lessons supplements, but they are definitely not lessons. I had to figure out, like when I got things in TPT that you have to proof, because I did find some mistakes, that you need to use those things as a supplement to the teaching that you do, however you choose to get that lesson across. And then there's some fun supplements in there that the kids really enjoy doing, and they're cute, and they have done things that I don't have time to create. So I've made some great purchases, but they're not lessons. Practical tips are kind of like a repeat from the last slide. Again, start small. You have to teach the computer skills first. Creating those self-correcting forms that I showed you, whether it's for fluency or if it is for the exit tickets that I showed you, it's really nice to put some of those in so you can get a quick glance at what your kids are good and bad at, rather than trying to go through every single thing that they have turned into you. You can look at that graph and you can see, you know, oh, 28 kids missed number 2. Clearly I failed there and we need to work on that. Clear and concise rules and expectations for the different modes of online learning. No different than sometimes you have to stop them in the hall and talk to them about classroom rules and how you act in the school. We had to review rules over and over again. And this is just one example of something I created for my counterpart and I. We created Zoom rules that we have to go over frequently, because I constantly have to tell them, you must mute yourself, You cannot take me on a tour of your house because I'm old and I get motion sickness. I cannot handle it. Pajamas are not acceptable. Bringing your baby brother and your dog to the meeting are not acceptable. So we have to kind of review this, because it's difficult to scold kids when you know their parents are right there too. So by repeating the rules over and over again, our lessons were more successful. I also found on Facebook that they have some fantastic groups out there. So if you haven't looked, if you are on Facebook, check out those groups. There's some amazing groups on there that people are giving away tons of free stuff. They are helping you with things. They are giving you ideas that you didn't even know existed. I learned a ton of things from joining the Google Classroom Facebook group, the remote learning Facebook group. There's even one called Free Teaching Ideas where people just share things. And even getting into those groups, again, even all of the things that I shared, you can't use those exactly because you're not teaching this book, but if you can take something and modify it, then that really saves you some time and some stress and thinking and planning. Some things that I would like to work on, I'm okay with Zoom. I would like to try the breakout groups. I'm probably not gonna do that this year, just because of where we are, but I think the breakout groups are really cool and I would like to be able to incorporate those. I have seen some things where kids can work on activities together by editing the permissions when you give them the assignment. I haven't done that yet. I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that with second grade right now with everything else I've hit them with. I have been using Flipgrid to hear them read. I would like to learn more about other ways to do that because I would like to hear them reading more. Small group specialized lessons. If, again, this continues, I would like to see how we can incorporate other staff. We have a program at our school called WIN, which is what I need. So every day for 30 minutes, I have a small group of kids that need a certain thing, whether it's fluency, comprehension, phonics skills, and I can work on them with those skills in a smaller group. I would like to see how we can make that work online if this continues and get other teachers involved in that to kind of help with those smaller groups and give them more intense instruction than I can give to my 24, 25 at a time. Another thing that I have asked, that I'm going to ask the district, and I recommend everybody should, like, what is your plan for technology, for teaching tools moving forward? Because again, when we came home with our laptops, again, I joined all these Google groups, saw all these super cool things. I would get on and it would say, you don't have permission to download this. You need an administrative password. So there were a lot of add-ons that I was reading about and I was so excited to try and share, but I couldn't get them. And when I contacted my computer people, they're like, yes, if you bring it in, we can do that for you. Well, I wasn't allowed in. So that was tough. I learned a lot of things online about using a document camera to share instead of sharing your screen if you don't have a whiteboard, which clearly I do not have a whiteboard in my kitchen. So a document camera would be a nice thing to have if that's something that you need. So I think that we really just need to ask our districts, like, if this is going to continue in any capacity, even if it's just a snow day plan, what are you going to give us to make this as successful as possible?